lest ye be judged. That's part of today's lesson. These are the funny colored glasses that we look at life with. And today we're talking about having a perspective on life. What is your perspective on life? Or to mix metaphors, the measure you use will be used with you. What's your measuring stick? What do you use to measure life? I know somebody's sitting there right now thinking, he's not going to really leave this on the entire talk. I want to hear a word he says. It's because of the measure you're using. I can't listen to a minister who wears funny glasses. So I'll take them off. But what's our perspective? How are we looking at life? You know, there's a Southern Baptist minister that I know who taught at Unity headquarters while he was a minister of a Southern Baptist church. By the way, his church is no longer a Southern Baptist church. They're now an American Baptist church. But at the time, they were a Southern Baptist church, and he got a phone call, he said, from a woman, because of the very progressive way he was teaching, who called him up and gave him a really strong, hard time because he'd taken down the sign that said Baptist Church. He'd replaced it with something, and he said, but it's still there. No! And she cussed him out. She said, I drove by and it's gone. And he said, but I'm looking out my window and it's still there. And she swore that he had actually taken the sign, which was a big neon sign, of the church down. And you know what? That's exactly what she saw. People, I found over the years, believe pretty much what their glasses tell them to believe. And that's one of the reasons why Jesus said, don't cast your pearls before pigs. They might turn and rend you, and don't share what's sacred or holy with pigs. Because if we're trying to get everybody to understand what we think is true, we're failing to understand that most people are operating from a standpoint of their funny colored glasses. We all are. Most people will believe what they choose to believe based upon what they bring to the situation. And most people will not be influenced or swayed by a whole lot of chit-chat and talk and trying to get them to understand. And that spiritual perspective that we think that we're giving to them that's going to help them so much may not be the thing that's the difference maker, rather leading them to their own perceptions but shining light. Jesus said, you are the light of the world. He said, put your light up on a lampstand. He said all kinds of things, but he didn't say, will you please come up with a better argument and get your point across. Today, I was sharing with Lynn, this is chapter 7 of Matthew. We're dealing with the Sermon on the Mount. And I said, you know, there's a thread in common between all of these things. There's so many powerful, pithy statements that are part of our cultural norms contained within chapter 7 of Matthew. But what's the theme? And she said, oh, I know the theme. It's Matthew's Facebook page. All of his reposts, all of his retweets, all of Jesus's core teachings are there. And you've heard these teachings. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Do not cast your pearls before pigs. Beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. Ask and it shall be given. Oh, there's one other. What's the other one? Judge not, lest ye be judged. You've heard these. These are up on crocheted on the wall of people's homes. These are things that are part of our vernacular. They show up in popular movies. They show up in cartoons. They show up everywhere. But we take them down off the wall and we put them to work because there's another foundation piece, and it's build your house on a foundation of rock, and that's in year 2. And the foundation of rock is when you take what you think, what you profess to be true, and you move it down off the wall, and you make it a foundation piece within your being. I'm going to start at the end. I wasn't going to do this, but usually when I get a crazy idea, it's the right one. So I will start at the end. The very last thing he says is really the theme of the whole chapter. And he says, anyone who hears these words of mine and obeys them is like a wise person who built their house on a foundation of rock. The rain poured down, rivers flooded over. The wind blew hard against that house, but it didn't fall because it was built on rock, a foundation of rock. But anyone who hears these words and doesn't obey them is like a foolish person who built their house on sand. Rain poured down, rivers flooded over, the wind blew hard against that house, and it fell. And what a terrible crash happened when it fell. What is this? Taking what you profess to believe and putting it to work and internalizing it, making it a foundation. Not just, as Jesus' brother James said, do not just be hearers of these words, be doers. Be doers. Faith without works is dead. You've got to take these things and put them into action. You've got to make the inside and the outside of the cup the same, he said. If there was a theme of all of Jesus' teachings, it's get to work. Get to work, people. Put it to work. I get to work, I put it to work. Together, I get to work and I put it to work. And what's the work? It's to clean the lens of our glasses, or even to trade out our old prescription for a new one. It's to trade in our old measuring stick to mix metaphors, and it's to get a new measuring stick. It's to look at things from a new perspective. But that means being willing to put in the energy up front at first in order to fulfill our spiritual mandate, which is what? To grow into our next level of being. I know we think that life is about making ourselves feel good or having some comfort, some pleasure, some happiness, and that's good. But we've got to be willing to forego some of that and put in a little spiritual effort. I'm going to read from the Katha Upanishad. This is Hinduism. The joy of spirit lasts forever, but passing pleasure does not. You must walk down one or the other of these two paths. If you choose joy, you'll have a good life. But if you pick only what's pleasant, you will miss out on life itself. Joy or pleasure. This is a choice that you must make every day of your life. A wise person walks the path of joy, even when it seems painful at first. But the ignorant are driven by their needs for immediate gratification. And these two are so far apart. Wisdom leads you closer to yourself, but ignorance takes you far away from that self. Buddhism. The Buddha said, a wise person is a person who is willing to sacrifice a short-term pleasure for a long-term joy. American philosophy. Emerson said, we sell the thrones of angels for a brief and turbulent pleasure. What are the thrones of angels? The spiritual growth, the spiritual value of life. So this is a come to Jesus talk. And my come to Jesus talk is to come to what he teaches and stands for in his spiritual principles, not what our culture tells us. I'm going to give you a couple of nerd facts. I do every week, but this is the nerd fact of the week. They did a study of people who read the Bible and their attitudes toward the Bible. And they found that the more people believed in the Bible, the more rigid and narrow-minded were their social attitudes. And the more people read the Bible, the more progressive and open-minded were their attitudes. This just in. The more you say you believe in the Bible, the more rigid and narrow-minded your attitudes are. But the more you actually read it, that is, build your foundation on rock, take it down, take the good book off your gun rack that you use as a weapon on other people, but actually put it to work. They found also there's an accumulative effect. The more people read the Bible, the more progressive and open-minded they were on social issues. And it was an accumulation. It was a long-term study. Now, what does this tell us? It tells us that spiritual truth, that actual spiritual principles, when they're internalized, change us at depth. I'm not talking about politics here. I'm talking about the attitudes of love your neighbor as yourself, which we're talking about here. The measure you use, we use with you. Judge not that you be judged. You can't read this stuff and keep that other stuff going. You know, there's another study. Here's another nerd fact. They asked Protestant ministers, and they found that 70% of them were more progressive in their social attitudes and spiritual attitudes, religious attitudes, more theology, than their congregations were, and 80% were more progressive than their congregations thought they were. Because they were in the business of internalizing this, but it's like, oh, I can't tell them that. They're going to kill me. You know, it's like Socrates. They're going to make me drink the hemlock. Because we got these people in a box. Why? Because we want to keep God in a box. Why? Because we want to keep our spirituality in a box. Why? Because we want to keep Jesus in a box. And what is that box? It's the comfortable, the familiar, the making everything the same, where nothing's going to change. I'm going to be feeling good. And everybody, and hello, Mrs. Jones, and hello, John Jones, and hello, you know, all that stuff. What is this? This is a living spiritual expression. I was going to say teaching. It's more than a teaching. It's a reality. And we've got to bring a new measuring stick. So look around in your life. You say, okay, what's going on with me? With this person, the situation, what you need is new glasses and a new measuring stick. Do not judge others so that you will not be judged. The measure you use will be used with you. Why then do you look at the speck in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the log in your own? How dare you say to your brother, please let me take that speck out of your eye, when you have a log in your own eye? Jesus was Jerry Seinfeld. He was a comedian. I'm not joking. He really was funny. You play actor, hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, then you might be able to see clearly to take that speck out of your brother's eye. Clean your lens. What is this? The measure you use will be used with you. Those words came to me when I was in the middle of a situation. I shared this recently many times, but I'm going to go back to it because this is the verse. It came to me meditation so strongly when I was in the middle of a situation where something seemingly unjust had happened and somebody was up to seemingly no good. And I was seemingly victimized, and I had some things that I needed to move in my life and to accomplish. And they said, and I got so strongly, the measure you use will be used with you. So if I'm harsh with this person, or if I go around going, did you know that Sally Jones did this to me, and that to me, and this happened, that I would not be able to move forward. It was going to be that simple. The measure I used was going to be used with me. And you got to give them a boon. A boon meaning a free gift. A free gift. Okay, give them some grace. So I did it pretty much except for one weekend. One weekend, I didn't even realize I was doing it, but I just kind of sloshed over a little bit. I'd gotten a whole bunch of news, and I kind of let it get to me, and I kind of sloshed over it. And I had dealt with some stuff. And then I went, oh my gosh, that's what it's meant. As long as I was under the covering mantle of grace, created by my willingness to use a measure of grace, then I received grace. But to the extent that I was trying to use trying to subtly, unconsciously get even, then I was going to receive that measure. So the measure that you use will be used with you. Judge not lest you be judged. What is judgment? Well, Jesus said elsewhere, there's use good judgment, not judge by appearances, or use false judgment. So there's a good judgment, and there's a false judgment, which he defined as judging by appearances. I'm judging you to the extent that I am confusing your unconscious behavior with who you are. Or worse, I'm judging you to the extent that I'm confusing my unconscious projection onto you with who you are. So what is judgment? False judgment. It is judging by the appearances of things only. Appearances are data. You learn from appearances. I'm not saying that if it looks wet out there that it's not raining. But it could be like Sig Paulson, the Unity minister, when they were praying for rain at Silent Unity, and he was in his 20s, and he was in the prayer meeting, or they were all in the prayer meeting, and he went up on the roof, and he got a bunch of hoses and turned them all on at once. As soon as he got the signal from his friend inside the building, and made everybody think it was raining, and it wasn't raining. Judge not by appearances. He got in trouble for that, by the way. But he survived. So judge not lest you be judged. What is right judgment? It's discernment. It's intuitive. The only right judgment there is the intuition. It's the judgment of the heart. It's like, I'll walk down this road. Why am I walking down this road? I don't know. My heart just told me to do that. And Jesus does tell us elsewhere to be wise as serpent, yet gentle as doves. He said, there's a time you've got to be aware of things. Beware of wolves in sheep's clothing, he says it elsewhere in this chapter. So he's not saying that you got to be a Blisnini and not know anything that's going on. But don't judge by appearances. Judge by your heart. Let your heart tell you, and it's not punitive and personal and all that stuff. Okay. Ask, seek, and knock. Ask, seek, and knock. Well, I got one more thing about this. Do not give what's holy to dogs. They'll only turn and attack you. Do not throw your pearls in front of pigs. They'll only trample them underfoot. Do not give what's holy to dogs. In the Gospel of Thomas, which some scholars think is even earlier than Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, he put it this way. Don't give what's holy to dogs or it'll end up in a pile of manure. dog manure. And if you give them your pearls, they'll add it to that pile of dog manure. That's Jesus talking. And I'm actually cleaning it up a little bit. Now, what's he trying to say to them? If you are trying so hard, that's a form of false judgment. If I try so hard to get you to see my wisdom, not allowing for the fact that you're pretty much going to look at things based upon what you bring to that situation, that's false judgment, because I am judging falsely not in a negative way, but in the way I want you to see. And that's also false judgment. Letting people be where they are and being very realistic about it. It's a clever dance between a good balance point, a narrow gate between, on one hand, you don't want to be, harshly judgmental. On the other hand, you don't want to be just la 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 la. It's being in the middle. Ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. Everyone who asks receives. Everyone who seeks will find. The door will be open to the ones who knock. Would any of you who are fathers give your son a stone when he asks for bread? Or would you give him a snake if he asks for a fish? As bad as you sometimes are as parents, you know how to give good things to your children. How much more then will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Oh boy. What is that? What's he talking about? Is he talking about getting what you want? Is he talking about forcing your will in the universe? No. He's talking about inserting a cause. Inserting a cause with your spiritual practices. And again, it's a balance point. This is that narrow gate again that he's going to talk about in a second. Being down the middle, not trying to force your will with your prayers, saying, I will get what I want, and I'm going to hold my breath and turn blue till I do. The other hand is, la 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 la. It's important for us to be co-creators with God. Remember what the physicist in the lab, they said that the physicist is a participant in the outcome of the experiment. We are co-creators with God. We have a role. Not to force our will on the universe personally, but there is a role of inserting a cause with our spiritual practices, especially spiritual causes. But also, if you need something, you can ask for it. And there's one time I said, well, thank you, God, for the best car in this city for $7,000. I looked down at the ads and I put my finger down and it was the one. I know, crazy. Another time, I couldn't find an apartment. Thank you, God, for the best apartment in the perfect way. I looked down and all it said was, 1 bedroom, $350. Well, I didn't say anything, but I knew it was the right one. And I went there and it was like a little hobbit house. It was this little cottage. It was this little cottage. And it was in Los Angeles. Wow. But it was in this little idyllic, but it was perfect. Another time I looked and looked and looked, and then finally, this is later, years later. I always forget these things, and I have to learn them all over again. But it was, thank you, God, for the best apartment available to me right now, and it was the one that I thought cost too much. But I went in and I could afford it just fine. I had a wonderful experience. So give thanks in advance for what it is you need on a spiritual level, without trying to force your will in the universe. Get involved. So seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be opened, ask and it shall be given. What does that mean? That means spiritually. Because God knows you need these things, Jesus said. Seek first the kingdom and all these things will be added to you. So what is you really asking for? What are you spending your time seeking and finding? I want to know God. I want to know spiritual awareness. I want to expand. I want to fulfill my potential as a soul. I got problems. Everybody's got problems. But I want to get past those problems just for a second and open up to something greater. All right. This is the one I love. Going through the narrow gate. The gate to destruction is wide and the road that leads to it's easy. There are many who travel it, but the gate to life is narrow and the way to it seems hard, so that there are few who find it. This is the razor's edge. This is the balance point. This is the middle path. This is what Jesus talked about elsewhere as it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom. He was talking about a person who's rich in attachments, in judgments, in stuff, in concepts, in this stuff. A person with dirty glasses. And that camel's eye, that eye of the needle, the eye of the needle was actually a gate into the city of Jerusalem. And the people knew he was making a metaphor about that gate. And you couldn't take a camel that it was a very narrow gate, and you couldn't get much through it with anything that was burdened down on it. So, what does this mean? This means let go of your attachments. This means focus, focus, focus. The middle path, the eye of the needle, the razor's edge, living your life balanced, not trying to only be right in the middle, but understand that life moves you from one side to the other, but that it's about making the effort that's necessary, as the Buddha said, letting go of momentary pleasure and comfort for something greater, as the Katha Upanishad said, being willing to live your life with a discipline of choosing spiritual joy over momentary pleasure. We got to be willing to do the things that we need to do. I'll never forget when I was in college, AAA canceled my membership because I'd rather buy records than get a new battery. So they come out and give me a jump. And then they canceled my membership. And that was very unkind of them, because I didn't want to go through the momentary discomfort of buying a battery. There are disciplines we need to do going forward, and the universe will give us feedback to show us, hey, you feel miserable right now because you need to take some steps and put in some energy up front. What are you doing in the morning? As Lynn says, does your soul matter to you as much as your teeth? Will you spend the 5 minutes on your soul that you spend flossing and brushing? Will you take the time to do what is yours to do? I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, because I don't know if we have time for the other things. So remember, Tuesday night we've got a wonderful class, and we go deeper into this whole chapter. So anyone who hears these words of mine and obeys them is like a wise person who built their house on a foundation of rock. Rain poured down, rivers flooded over, the wind blew hard against that house. It did not fall because it was built on rock. Anyone who hears these words of mine and does not obey them is like a foolish person who built their house on sand. The rain poured down, the rivers flooded over, the wind blew hard against the house, and it fell. What a terrible fall that was. What does he mean by a terrible fall? Well, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross says when people are faced with end of physical life issues, that is, they're dealing with their impending transition, what we call death, which is just a movement, a door between two different rooms of life. People who believe wishy-washy have a miserable time of it. She said, my experience is that people who are just kind of religious, and they just kind of have a miserable time. She said, atheists who know what they believe do better. She says the people who do the best are the people who have a spiritual, internalized, integrated practice. So what are you putting in? But I mean, being wishy-washy. Don't be wishy-washy. Jesus said, say yes or say no. For heaven's sakes, don't, be hot or be cold. Don't be lukewarm or you're going to spit out of my mouth. Be in integrity with your being, even if you're wrong. but make it a part of yourself. Because you can always, have you ever noticed that some of the greatest saints were the worst scoundrels? If you read the lives of the saints, how many of you were raised Catholic and read the lives of the saints? You ever read that? Somebody gave me a copy of it, and man, these were some real crusty characters. Because it takes people like that, salty people, to go back to what Jesus talked about, for when they have a transformation, then they got something. They got some mojo. They got some oomph. They got some pizzazz. They got some chutzpah. What other cultural things can we throw out there? And do you have that? Do you have that? Oh, you stand for something. You stand for something. It's internalized. It's a part of you. Maybe you're wrong, but at least you're giving it your all. And it's not just about being comfortable and being pleasurable and I want to get by and I want to be a little less miserable. I want to be a little less miserable to get... No. That's not an affirmation. But let's get out of that attitude and move into an awareness, a deeper understanding. build into our consciousness, build into our beingness, that foundation of rock, because the winds can come and, hey, a hurricane's a hurricane. And you be dealing with it, but if you got a good foundation, you're going to be okay. You know, I went through that Loma Prieta earthquake in 1987 in San Francisco, or 1989. And that was the big one, you know, where the Bay Bridge collapsed and stuff. And I was in the middle, I think I shared this, I was in the middle of a church board meeting. And it happened. And we all went under the tables, which is a smart thing to do in an earthquake. And I turned to the guy to my right. He was the chief seismologist for Stanford. He was the CNN expert that they would interview on seismology. That's what he did for a living. And as soon as it stopped shaking, I said, rate it. He said, 7. He was off by 0.1. But what happened was, even if it was right near ground zero, if people had a strong foundation, if underneath there was bedrock, the house was just, minor damage. But many miles away in San Francisco in the Marina District, where they had done landfill, and so the ground underneath was essentially jello. It was seawater infused fill dirt. Those houses collapsed. When you saw the pictures in that disaster of the terrible wreckage, those houses were 50 miles away from ground zero, but they had a bad foundation. So are you building a foundation? Because the difference between us and them is that we can choose to build in a foundation of solid rock. And we do that with our spiritual awareness. We do that with our spiritual practice. We do that by taking our spiritual principles and practicing them every day. This is a church of center of spiritual growth. So what are we doing? It's okay to be all the other things. But what are we doing to make these teachings a part of us? Oh, this is kind of rough stuff, so I'm just going to throw it out. Be on your guard against false prophets who come to you looking like sheep on the outside, but in the inside they're really wolves. You'll know by them by what they do. Thorn bushes do not bear grapes. Briars do not bear figs. A healthy tree bears healthy fruit. A poor tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a poor tree cannot bear good fruit. And any tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown away and consumed in fire. So then you know false prophets by what they do. What is this false prophet business? Well, we certainly see that in our spiritual worlds, where there are teachings that bear negative results. I remember in my very first church, and I'm going to go here with this, I had this young couple come in. They were members of a church across town, and their friends told them to come see me because their church members stalked them 24/7 to make sure they didn't spend the night at each other's house. They were engaged. And it's like they were terrified. They were having PTSD. It's like, what is this? Being so concerned about outer things. But also, what about in us? I mean, that's enough of talking out there. We can see that. What about inside of us? What are those false teachings that the false prophets? Those are those voices inside of you, inside your head that tell you you're not worthy. Those voices inside your head that tell you that you're not good enough. The voice inside of you says you have to do it perfectly. Oh, you didn't do it perfectly again. The voice inside of you that says, oh, don't even try. Why bother? All of those things are the false prophets, and they bear negative fruit in that. You're not going to get any results with that attitude. A beautiful, good tree gives good fruit. I had an exception to that when I had a lemon tree in Southern California that looked all gnarly and weird, but it gave the sweetest lemons. But just ignore that one exception and know, generally speaking, it's a metaphor. Good trees give good fruit. So what is your foundation piece? What is the tree? What are you building into yourself? Okay, so let's do a little prayer. And so just take a deep breath and let it out. And just say to yourself, I am willing to get new eyes. I'm willing to have new perspective. I'm willing to have my old way of looking at things and listening to things replaced by a new way. God, I am willing to see things with new eyes, to listen with new ears so that I can catch the angel whispers of guidance. And I'm willing to be a friend to the universe And I'm willing to be a friend to the people, a spiritual friend to the people around me. Thank you, God. And so it is. And we take a deep breath and we let it out, and we remember that the difference between an aphorism, a slogan, and a spiritual principle is that the aphorism or slogan stays crocheted up on our wall. And the spiritual principle we make part of us, becomes a foundation piece for us. And so we want to change our spiritual perspective. We want to put on new glasses. We want to have a new measuring stick. And what we want to do is to start looking at things with a spiritual perspective and internalize, make it part of us. And God, if we feel like we don't know how to make our spiritual beliefs a part of us, we just move into this awareness. We know it's all around us, it's within us. Your spiritual awareness will teach us what we need to know. We will be moved, and we are now, in the presence of pure being that moves us Godward, inward, upward, expanding into an awareness that gives us a new perspective on life. God, we have people in our lives that we look at certain ways. I'm willing to see this person with new eyes, listen to this person with new ears, and be that spiritual friend that this person is looking for. And for every circumstance in our lives, we say, God, I am ready to look at this with new eyes, a new perspective. To listen for guidance with new ears. And to harmonize myself with these circumstances as they present themselves for my spiritual growth. I may feel like my life is about survival and just trying to get by day, but that's not it. Because in my creative grappling with some of these situations, I take into my beingness the possibility of great spiritual awareness and teaching, great spiritual growth. Every circumstance in my life comes forth, drawn by my spiritual desire for growth, to lift me into my true self. And so I say, I am willing to see life with new eyes, to listen with new ears, and to be that spiritual being that cooperates with my spiritual growth. New glasses, new perspective, new measuring stick. New understanding, new heart. New heart. Move deeper into this awareness. Every now moment contains everything we need to move us deeper. Thank you, God, for the opportunities to look at things with new eyes, to listen with new ears, and to be a spiritual friend, to harmonize ourselves with the lessons that life brings us, to lift up into our new awareness. We utilize every spiritual opportunity. We take spiritual responsibility, and we move deeper into our spiritual awareness. We know that we're coming here today to to get new glasses, to see things differently, and to bring to life a new measure. Thank you, God. And so it is.